Hi, I'm Paul Jermain, and welcome to another session of Smart Boating. As you know, the primary purpose of the show is to give you information on various topics that will help you make smarter decisions and have more fun on the water. But every now and then we take a little side trip into a place that I think you'll find interesting, and that's the case today, because we're at the Antique Boat Museum in Clayton, New York, and we're joined by the Executive Director, Rebecca Hopfinger. Rebecca?
Hi, Paul.
Good to see you.
Thank you. We're glad you're here.
Thank you. Well, Rebecca, this is a very cool museum with lots and lots of boats. But before we get into taping some of the different boats today, can you share a little bit about the museum, like when it was established and what the mission is, and maybe some key events?
Sure. So we're actually celebrating our 50th year as a museum this year. So we started in the late 1960s, and it grew out of actually the little historical museum downtown, the Thousand Islands Museum. There was an auxiliary branch that formed the auxiliary, and there was then acquiring of the properties here where we're located on the waterfront. And over the years, over the last 5 decades, we've grown into what you see today, the Antique Boat Museum.
It's grown and grown and grown with hundreds of boats and acres, really covers acres, doesn't
Correct,
it? Right?
yeah.
Yeah. And what's the mission? Is there a core mission here as part of the museum?
Well, like many museums, we collect, preserve, and interpret, and in this case, freshwater recreational boating materials from all over the United States and southern Canada, and really with a slight emphasis on the St. Lawrence River.
I see, I see. And are there certain key events or exhibits that are noteworthy here typically?
Absolutely. So we have one of the oldest continuous running boat shows, which is always the first full weekend in August.
Oh, okay.
So next year, you'll have to come back for that.
Yes, I will. Okay, so that's the key point. Well, we've got lots of great boats. So why don't I get started taping, and I'm going to work with an expert to give an explanation each one as we go along.
That's right.
Well, Bo, you know, as a professional boat restorer, I'm sure you can appreciate the uniqueness of this particular boat. This is a Sea Lion, right?
Right. It's the 24-foot triple cockpit model that Howard Lyon developed in the early parts of his career. He was a Garwood dealer, and he was actually in New York City, and he was the biggest Garwood
operation
in the country.
Yeah.
And he started to flex his muscle with Garwood and tell Garwood what he wanted, and you know, what happened was Garwood was not that responsive to Howard's demands, and so Howard Lyon stepped out and said, well, I'll do my own.
Okay.
And he contracted with the Purdy's of New York to build another line of boats and sell them under his name.
Now these were influenced by the Hacker, John Hacker, right?
Well, he did have an agreement with John Hacker between times.
Yes.
But what happened was Garwood heard about Lyon's behind-the-scenes action and shut him off and said no more boats.
Okay.
So he went to Hackercraft for a short amount of time to provide boats that he could sell. And then the Purdy's got their line running, and this was one of the first models that was developed by the Purdy's and sold as Sea Lions.
This is a pretty boat here. What an interior, huh?
Yeah, they were more stoutly built because his clientele was basically on the saltwater in the New York area. So these were good riding, you know, solidly built boats for rougher conditions.
Oh yeah, yeah. What sort of power do they typically have on?
This boat was running the Chrysler, Chrysler Imperial, and that was, well, they made it in the 120, and the high performance was a 140, but this is the 120 horsepower.
Okay, and that moved it right along.
Yeah, it was a decent performer. Yes.
Yeah. Well, this boat here, this is a Hacker. Speaking of Hacker, this is a 30-foot Hacker, right?
Yeah, this is the, well, I won't say the largest one he ever built, but this was the largest production triple cockpit boat that Hacker built in the 30s.
Oh.
So we call them the 30-30 because 1930, 30 feet.
Makes sense. Yeah.
Highly coveted by the collectors at this point.
Really?
Yeah.
He was a very famous designer, Hacker, right?
I think Hacker was about the best in the business.
Yeah, yeah.
He really had an eye for clean lines and beautiful looks.
Yeah, that is a really pretty boat. Now he was in business. I guess he opened up his first shop in the early 1900s, closed as a result of the Depression, but made a lot of nice boats and had a lot of influence along the way. This one is Honduras planking, if I understand correctly.
Right.
White oak.
Yep. Hacker was quite a purist. He used Central American mahogany
Oh,
on
okay.
oak frames. He used rivets. These boats were not screwed together. The sides were all put on with rivets. The
Oh, they
bottom
were.
were done with rivets, which is more labor intensive, but
Oh, it
I
is.
think a better way to construct.
Okay. Here's a nice shot of the interior.
Yeah, and he was not shy with his interiors. They were quite nice.
Yeah, it looks beautiful. A lot of chrome.
Yeah, and the cockpit trim, I think Hacker was one of the first to use that metal trim around the crash pad in the cockpits.
Okay.
Everybody else adapted to it pretty soon after.
Oh, I see. All
And
right.
the little wing windshields was another one of his features or selling points.
Yeah. Yeah. Another unique part of the boat.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but nice boats, coveted today by collectors.
Now, what are we looking at for an engine here? I think
Well-
it was originally had a Stirling in it.
Yeah,
right?
this is a
Couple hundred horse.
replacement.
This is a replacement engine.
replacement engine, but it initially would have had the large Stirling, which was 780 cubic inch.
Now, this is a interesting launch here. This was made by Consolidated, which was actually the result of a merger of two other companies, right?
Right. Well, Gas Engine and Power was the hull builders, and I have to look at my notes here, but they merged
Seabury.
with Charles Seabury. And I don't think they took the Consolidated name till a few years later.
Okay.
But the two companies merged.
Yes.
One was building engines, one was building the hulls.
I see.
And doing very nice traditional launches from the turn of the century.
Now, because of this, it was a naphtha launch. This overcame some interesting regulations that were in place, right? And they became very popular because of that.
Well, yeah, they frightened me a little bit, but the government had established new rules that said you had to have a license to operate a steam engine.
Right, because they had so many accidents, right?
They had, some explosions, frankly. So they developed the naphtha engine, which bypassed the regulations. But to me, they were boiling gasoline rather than water.
Yes, it was a crude gasoline, yes.
And I think that to me is more frightening than burning or boiling water.
Well, they had a lot of space in them, didn't they?
Yeah, because the engine was way in the back.
Yes.
They had all the room in the forward section.
Yes, and now that was, I guess that was a three-cylinder, or just 4 horsepower.
Right, and basically a steam engine, frankly, but
Yes.
it was being pressurized with vaporized gasoline.
Okay, which helped them steer around the regulations.
Right.
Yeah, yeah. That's a very interesting looking power plant.
It certainly is, and we don't see many of those today.
Look at that stern. Now, this is an interesting boat, a 1929 22-foot Fay and Bowen Junior Runabout Launch. Kind of a long title, but this is a local boat, right? Up
Right.
in the Clayton area?
Yeah,
upstate
these were
New
built
York?
in Geneva, New York. The Fay and Bowen companies had a pretty interesting start. They were bicycle builders, basically.
Yeah.
And then they moved on to engines, and there wasn't enough market for their engines, so they thought, well, let's build boats for our
Okay,
engines.
right.
So, and today they're actually more famous for their boats than their engines.
Is that right?
But they started out as just engine builders, and in an attempt to sell engines, they built boats.
That makes sense. Now, they call this a long-decked model, right?
Right.
So
This
that's
was-
a little unusual, because the ones prior to that
Well,
were different, right?
I mean, the term auto boat was coined early, and this is an auto boat style,
Oh.
which has the engine forward and then the seating in the rear.
I see.
So the engine was forward of the driver, just like in an automobile.
Okay.
So-
All right. All
And,
right.
and I have some questions on this boat. I think this boat got shortened.
Oh,
Because
okay.
I've never seen information about a 22.5
All right.
foot Fay and Bowen.
Here's the interior.
Yeah, and this is
Very
very
interesting.
traditional, brass hardware. Got the old,
Oh, the
old
brass.
gauges and the key switch in the center.
Looks very roomy.
Yeah, they were very nice.
Yeah.
They don't pound. I mean, it's a displacement boat, so it knifes through the
I
water.
see. Okay.
So they may make some spray, but you don't get bounced around when you're in it.
That's kind of nice.
It is. They are lovely boats. Again, not many have survived, so they're coveted by
Very
collectors.
rare. So this is the sort of thing you see at the museum.
Yeah.
Now, this looks like an original power plant
Yeah,
here.
this is particularly unusual to see. This is an original Fay and Bowen engine. So that makes this boat pretty important.
Does it? Yeah. Okay. Now, this was an interesting boat. It's a 1931 21-foot Dodge Runabout. So they're related to the Dodge brothers of automobile fame?
They are. This was Horace Dodge, which was son of John Dodge, I believe. And he was a boat racer and loved boats and finally got into the boat business himself. We like his boats. I mean, he built a real nice package.
And he had some nice features here, like on the bow you can see what on a Rolls Royce would be the Spirit of Ecstasy, you know, the symbol.
Right.
And this is a
the mermaid.
We
call them the mermaids.
The mermaids,
right.
yeah. So that was an interesting touch there. And apparently maybe the windshield and some of the other
there's nice
places
features.
showed styling.
There's nice features here because those windshields would fold down. You could, and it was a 4-piece windshield. You would tip it forward a little, fold the wing in, and then you can see the little clips on the deck, and the windshield would fold right down on the deck.
Oh, I see.
And this boat was a twin cockpit when it had windshields fore and aft.
Okay.
One of the nice things about Dodge was that's a Duesenberg steering wheel.
Oh, it is.
Yeah, and dash panel. So
Really?
he was using very high-end components in his boats.
It looks very well finished. It just has a feel of being very well finished off.
They were unusual hardware. We didn't see the bow light, but the bow light is the air scoop, bow light, and lifting ring all combined into one.
Multi-function, huh?
Yeah, a very nice boat.
Yeah. Now here's Consolidated. We talked a little bit earlier about this company, which it's the result of a merger between, what was it, Gas Power?
Gas Engine and Power and Charles Seabury.
And Charles Seabury, right? And they got together. And again, they were important in dealing with the regulations that had to do with power plants and licensing and so on and so forth.
Right.
I guess Speedway was kind of the brand name to the different boats.
It's what they trade named them, the Speedway launch. But this was a company out of New York City area, and they catered to all the high-end customers in New York.
Yeah.
And they placed launches and tenders on the large yachts, the 100-plus footers.
Okay.
So Speedway was a noted builder.
Interesting. Now it's a very slim boat, 32 feet by 6-foot beam. That's a pretty slender boat.
Well, by the day, I mean, in this era, 1917, 16 or 6 feet wide was not exactly a narrow boat.
Oh, is that right?
By today's standards, particularly narrow.
Right, very narrow, yeah. It's interesting how this is all finished natural, if you will, not painted.
I'm a little surprised. I would expect to see bottom paint on there in a color green or red.
Okay, all right. Looks very deep.
Yeah, this is a stout boat.
Yeah.
I mean, this is not a small launch. This is a very good sized one at 32 feet.
Yeah. You can see the hardware and the shift, the forward transmission, if you will.
The auto boat style, which is the engine forward, seating in the aft.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. And
lots of cockpit space.
Yes. Now, they may have had wicker chairs in there as well.
Right.
That was the standard back in those days.
Well, that would have made sense. Yeah. That's Zonta there.
Zonta, yeah.
This is a really interesting little boat by the Lozier Motor Company. It's a 1905 24-foot Lake Special. And these guys really started in the engine business, right, Lozier?
Lozier was an engine builder, right. And then they contracted out to Matthews to build their hulls.
Okay.
And that we saw that earlier with the gas engine Consolidated too. But one company would build motors, one company would build boats, they would put them together.
Yeah, and Matthews was out of Ohio, if I remember.
Yeah, Midwest.
Yeah.
The Antique Boat Museum just got all of the records from Matthews.
Oh, really?
So they have quite a collection of information on these boats now.
But Lozier was a New York-based.
Yes, it was.
New York. We see a lot of New York-based companies up in that neck of the woods, the upper New York, lower Canada.
And this boat's painted on the bottom, more traditional versus the other.
Yeah. It's really got very pretty lines to it.
Really, lovely bow.
Flows very nicely.
Yeah. Most boats would have a much more plumb bow back in that era. And, and that's really quite rakish and stylish.
And this is have the full canopy here.
Yeah.
And looking at the interior, looks like the steering station, the helm is at the bow.
Yeah, and a chain drive, or chain connection to the rudder, which is, well, yeah, it was traditional.
Yeah.
And then bench seating on the outside. This is a very traditional construction style. And then you'd see the little Lozier motor in the back.
That was their thing, right? That's what they brought to the party, right?
Yeah, and that was their famous, 5-horse, 1-cylinder.
They had to hand crank that,
and you would, no electric starting here.
No. It's got a beautiful stern to it. Now here's the Century. Now Century, of course, was very popular back then. This is a 1946 15-footer, and They had some boats, and I think they think this might be one that were in production prior to the war and got shelved.
Right, during the war, production was stopped.
Yes.
So
Yes.
yeah, so anything that was built in, let's say, 44 or 5 got put on the shelf and then not sold until after the war.
Right. Or
So-
maybe even finished, right?
Yep.
They might have been halfway
Right.
done, and then they said, okay, bring that back out and let's finish it off. So that's
Right.
interesting because this has got some pre-war features, even though it was sold post-war.
Post-war boat, right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and this is an unusual boat in my world because this is not a hard chine runabout like
Soft chine.
basically all of the Centuries. So they built a couple of models that was a round bilge construction. And they tended to be wet if they were run hard.
Okay.
So that's why you'll see that spray
The
rail.
spray rail, the white spray rail there. Yeah.
And this is very traditional hardware, traditional dash panel from the late 40s. Traditional 3-spoke hard rubber wheel was on most of the smaller
windshield
boats.
didn't really have a frame on it, did it?
No, just a
much more.
three-piece of metal with 2 glass plates. And unusual ventilators for the engine compartment.
Yeah.
They only did that for a couple of years.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
And this had a gray marine engine in it, right?
Yeah, this is the 462, which was 62 horsepower,
62
4-cylinder.
horsepower. Yeah.
They used the same engine here in their little race boats.
Oh, they did.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So this was probably a carryover.
Yeah. That's a pretty little boat. Now this is a very unusual Chris-Craft from the sense that it's a 1928 30-foot custom boat, right? There was a pretty limited production of these made, right?
The largest boats were probably only built on an order basis.
Oh,
So, and this 30-footer was their largest runabout.
okay.
So, and they built very few of these. They introduced in the lineup, and by the time they had sold a few, it was, into the Depression.
Right.
And the market dried up pretty seriously for them.
Right, because this boat was about $7,000 back in that day, when like a car was under $1,000. It was
Right.
a whole different league.
This was an expensive toy for sure.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and so
And they only made 3 of these, I guess.
yeah,
in
3 runabouts.
1928.
Yeah. No, the real limited production. The museum's pretty fortunate to actually have one
Yes.
because
Probably the only place you can see it.
Well-
See something like this. It's so rare.
right. I only know of 2 in existence.
Oh.
So they've got one of them, and this is a pretty nice example.
Yeah. What kind of power was in this boat?
These would have had the biggest V8 that Chris-Craft was producing,
I see.
which is the A70.
A70.
Yeah, it was a little over 800 cubic inch
Holy smoke. Wow.
in a V8 format, like 1900 or 1800 RPM engines.
Oh, okay.
So low RPM, but big torque
All
and
sorts of torque.
pretty good horsepower.
Yeah.
And this boat has the original folding crow top.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
So you could just snap it up. They called them one-man tops.
Oh, nice. Well, here's an interesting boat. Now we're here with Garwood. This is a 16-foot 1935 speedster model. Garwood again, connected with speed in general, right? He
Yeah.
made very fast boats. Had a lot of success racing.
Yeah, and this was a foray into small boat racing. They didn't do that many of them. They're highly coveted by collectors.
They are.
Yeah, this is one of the rarest Garwoods that you can see or find.
Yeah.
And the 16-footer was, I believe it was built for club racing in the Thousand Islands.
Yes, I think you're right.
And
yes.
then it was popular enough there that they put it into the production lineup, and the average public could buy one of these.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they had several choices on engines. They would run Chryslers, and some of them had the Gray Marine
Okay.
Racing Phantoms.
Okay. Okay.
But these provided snappy performance in a small boat.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting hull shape there.
Yeah, well, it was almost the same as their standard 16-foot runabout.
It was.
But, they moved the engine forward and the driver back,
I see.
and
okay.
it's more like a race boat,
Yes.
and good performance.
Yeah. That's a pretty boat. Interesting, all the different wood colors they blended together there.
Well, this is mid-30s, and the two-tone deck configuration was real popular at that
It
time.
was. Okay.
But these were fun boats.
This is a split cockpit, right?
No, just a single seat in the back.
Just a single seat in the back.
Yeah,
right.
one seat.
Right. Oh, yeah, right.
But
So, but and that would make sense for racing, right? You wouldn't be carrying
Right.
around a lot of
Well,
people. You'd be there to race.
Makes a smoother ride if you're sitting in the back.
That's true. That's true. Now here's a big race boat here. This is a 33-foot, 1927 33-foot Baby Gar.
Baby Gar, and we've
Baby
gone
Gar,
from the
yeah.
smallest Garwood to the largest.
Yes, yes, yes.
This is the boat that really put Garwood on the map.
Oh, it is.
Yeah, they were first developed in 1922,
Mm-hmm.
and what happened was Garwood bought all of the U.S. government's surplus of the V-12 Liberty aircraft engines.
Aircraft engines,
and
right.
they were water-cooled, so Garwood could convert them to marine use.
Beautiful, yeah.
And so he had a pile of 425 horsepower motors that, you know, he could go racing with, basically.
Right.
And he contracted Chris Craft, because he did not have a production facility.
Okay,
He contracted with Chris Craft to build these early hulls,
okay. Mm-hmm.
and then he would outfit them with his engines.
Oh, I see. Mm-hmm.
And these were 50-mile-an-hour boats.
Yeah, these are fast boats, right?
Right, back when.
Right.
And he marketed well, and the very wealthy sportsmen of the era bought them.
Mm-hmm.
This one was bought by E.J. Noble, the Lifesaver company.
President, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And he had, you know, it was almost a standing rule that, you know, he'd race anybody on the St. Lawrence River.
Right. Well, with the support of the aircraft engine, that was a big plus.
Yeah, and you know, there was, I won't call it grudge match racing, but
there it is right there.
And here's the big Liberty, and you can see it's in the boat backwards.
Oh, it is.
So the drive shaft and the transmission are aiming forward, and then it would go up to a gearbox that would transfer the power down through the shaft underneath the engine.
I see. Yeah. Now here's a slightly smaller boat. This is a little 17-foot Chris Craft runabout built in 1942. This Chris Craft, of course, was the mass producer of these wooden speedboats, right?
Right. I mean, Chris Craft was the world's largest builder.
Yeah.
The 17-foot barrelback's another highly coveted boat. This is the last of the generation. So in 1942, of course, the war came on, so this was the last of them.
Oh, really? Okay.
But they were, you know, you can see the round covering boards. They were sculpted. We'll see a picture of the transom, but it's totally round, very few hard edges.
Yes, yes.
And these were twin cockpit forward.
Okay.
So they had put the engine in the rear and
I
made it
see.
for a nice, comfortable boat for all the people in the front.
Now these used, Chris Craft made their marinized engines,
Yes.
right?
Yep. Chris Craft marinized their own engines, so
Yeah.
we'll see the Model K engine. But there's a nice view of the front, and you see that everything has a rounded edge to it.
Yes, yes,
So,
yes.
so the collectors really like these boats.
Yeah, are they fairly rare at this point?
Well, there's enough around, so you can get one if you want one.
Okay, all right.
And this is very traditional inside. You know, Chris Craft embellished the dash panel with the two metal strakes.
Oh, right,
Stainless
right.
steel
Yeah.
strakes running across.
Yeah.
But nice upholstery, nice hardware, pretty comfortable riding boats. Probably 4 people maximum is,
Okay.
you know, it is 17
Yeah.
feet. It's not big.
But for the footage, it looks like they've given some decent
Right.
Seating room.
It was a
passengers.
good setup. And here's the Model K.
Here's the Model K, yeah.
95 horsepower. Now, Chris Craft bought these from the Hercules Corporation and then built all of the manifolds and the transmissions themselves.
Oh,
Or
they
not
did?
But the
Okay.
housings.
All right.
Yeah.
There's the barrel back turn. Now this is a very interesting boat. This is a pretty old one here, 1907, 22 foot, built by Mr. Norris.
Yeah. Bub Norris
Norris.
was the builder here. He
Now,
was
he didn't have any background
No,
in boat
he was-
design or anything like that, did
he was just a good, smart engineer.
Right.
And obviously a good woodworker, because he built this boat.
Wow.
And he kept it up in Maine on Lake Cobbsacony. And I mean, frankly, I think it's the most important boat that the museum owns.
You do?
I do. It's never been touched. It was put into a barn maybe in 1910 or 12,
Okay.
and it never left. It stayed there until it was brought to the museum.
That's amazing. That's again, that's another boat you only see in a museum. It's just so rare, right?
And it should, I mean, it should not be used in my world, at least what I think.
Right, right.
And it's a fantastic piece of history.
Yeah, it's an interesting shape to it. It looks like a missile. It's long and skinny.
Well, I don't believe it's 4 feet wide. I think it's 3 feet something
3 feet
wide.
Yeah. And this has got basically a displacement hull to it with a little flattening towards the stern for some lift.
Yeah, what they did, well, what happened was with a fantail type boat, the more power you put in it, the more the transom would drop.
Yes, right.
So by this era, and this is 1906 or 7, they had started to widen and flatten the transoms out to give it a little extra lift so it would stay level in the water.
And this engine here is about a 15 or a 20 horsepower.
Yeah, I believe that's the 20 horsepower Roberts.
20 horsepower
And
Robert.
it was probably put in the boat a little after it was built.
Okay, so
But-
originally they might have started with a 15 and then moved
Right.
up a little bit.
But you see, this is an absolutely original boat. It's never been refinished. It's never been touched by any restorer or anybody.
Yeah, look at that stern. Isn't that
Yeah,
interesting?
and the
way it curves
original
around like that.
and the gold leaf.
Here's another racing boat, a little newer. This is a 1924 26-foot Gold Cup racer,
Yep.
Miss Detroit.
Miss Detroit.
So that was the Detroit line was very famous for
Well,
its racing efforts, right?
This was one of Garwood's race boats. Garwood was probably the winningest racer of all.
Okay.
And he won the most because he spent the most.
Oh, okay.
And the powers that be finally changed the rules to get him out of racing.
Okay.
But this was one of his race boats. This would have raced in the sweepstakes class.
Yeah. Who would have built this? Was it been Chris Craft probably built the boat?
More
for
than
Garwood?
likely, yeah, because Chris Craft, or excuse me, Garwood wasn't building his own boats until 1925.
A little later.
So, so if this is 24, it was built by Chris Craft for Garwood for racing, and we know it raced a lot. It was raced as Teddy.
Yeah. These were what? Sweepstakes races?
Sweepstakes, yeah. It was, I believe, a 1,500 cubic inch engine, which seems awfully large
Yes.
for a 26-foot boat.
Yeah.
However, and Garwood had his two little mascots, Teddy and Bruin, which were his teddy bears that he put in his boat for good luck.
For good luck. Yeah.
So he had a couple of sweepstakes boats, and one was Teddy, and I believe the other was Bruin.
Bruin, that's right,
So-
right. And Teddy, who we're
Teddy
looking at right now,
is this
Miss
boat.
Detroit,
Right.
was very had a very good track record.
Yeah, yeah. No, he raced these quite competitively and successfully.
Yeah. Here's the cockpit, very Spartan, very
Yep,
functional, very focused.
yep. The dash has been changed, I think, over the years,
Adjusted a little bit.
but there it is, the real boat.
Well, Rebecca, it's hard to believe, but we're out of time for the show today. We've seen a lot of interesting boats and learned a lot of interesting history about them. Is there anything you'd like to add before we wrap up today?
Well, certainly a very big thank you to you, Paul, for coming and sharing with your viewers what we love so much here in Clayton, our Antique Boat Museum and our collection.
Yes, yes, yes. You've got quite a collection. Now, the season is what, May through October?
That's right. We open in early May and we close in mid-October. Columbus Day is our last day that we're open to the public.
Okay.
So we'd encourage people to view us via our website, abm.org.
Yeah.
And there's additional information there for people interested in coming.
That's great. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Paul.
You're welcome, and thank you, Smart Boating viewers, for watching us today. The website for comments or questions is www.smartboatingus.com. Thank you.